Sparta, Greece. The most feared warriors in the ancient world built a city that almost no one would ever fear walking into today. No great walls. No grand temples. No statues left standing. Sparta conquered through sheer human discipline. And then it vanished so completely that modern visitors often mistake its ruins for a forgotten village. And yet, just 300 Spartans once held a mountain pass against an army of hundreds of thousands. Spartan boys were taken from their mothers at age 7. A Spartan soldier was never allowed to run from battle, not once, not ever. Sparta even beat Athens, the greatest power in Greece, in a war that dragged on for 27 brutal years. But the city that built this terrifying war machine left behind almost no art, no writing, no buildings. At its peak, Sparta was the most feared military force on Earth. Then, in just one generation, its army was wiped out on an open field by a force half its size. Sparta never recovered. So how did the most disciplined society in history rule Greece for centuries, then disappear almost overnight? Using AI-reconstructed imagery and ancient Greek sources, we're about to find out. Let's begin at the beginning. Long before Sparta became a name that struck fear into Greece, it was just a quiet valley. The Eurotas River cut through the southern tip of the Greek peninsula, in a region called Laconia. The land here was rich. Mountains wrapped around it like natural walls, cutting it off from the rest of Greece. It was easy to defend and easy to farm, which made it a perfect place to settle. Around 1000 BC, a people called the Dorians moved into this valley. They were part of a larger wave of migrations that swept across Greece after the collapse of earlier Bronze Age civilizations. The Dorians who settled here did something unusual. Instead of building one city and fighting off their neighbors, several small villages simply merged together. 4, maybe 5 communities joined as one, scattered along the riverbank rather than packed behind a single set of walls. This is where Sparta's strangest habit begins. Most Greek cities surrounded themselves with thick stone walls for protection. Sparta never bothered. The Spartans believed their soldiers were their walls. Why build stone when you had men who would rather die than retreat? But a city without walls still needs land, food, and room to grow. And by the 8th century BC, Sparta had a problem. Its population was rising fast, and the Eurotas Valley could not feed everyone. Most cities solved this by sending settlers overseas to start new colonies. Sparta chose something far darker. Just across the mountains lay a fertile region called Messenia. Sparta looked at it and instead of asking to share it, decided to take it by force. What followed would shape Spartan society for the next 400 years. The conquest of Messenia did not happen in a single battle. It took 2 long, brutal wars, stretched out over more than a century, starting around 743 BC. Sparta fought hard, lost soldiers, and came close to giving up more than once. But in the end, Sparta won. And what it did with that victory changed everything. Instead of simply taking land, Sparta took people. The Messenians were turned into helots, a class of state-owned slaves forced to farm the land for their Spartan masters. The numbers were staggering. Helots may have outnumbered actual Spartan citizens by 7 to 1. Sparta had won a war, but now it was sitting on top of a population that hated it and vastly outnumbered it. This is where a lawgiver named Lycurgus enters the story, though much about him remains a mystery, even to the ancient Greeks themselves. Whether he was one real man or a legend built from many reformers, the system credited to him reshaped Sparta completely. Boys were pulled from their homes at age 7 and placed into the Agoge, a brutal training program built to produce soldiers, not citizens. 2 kings ruled at once, checking each other's power. A council of elders, the Gerousia, made the laws. Every part of Spartan life now served one single purpose: military strength. This was not just ambition, it was survival. Sparta had built its entire identity around controlling a slave population many times its own size, and that left it constantly afraid. One helot uprising, one moment of weakness, and Sparta itself could be wiped out from within. Fear, more than glory, was about to shape everything Sparta became next. By 480 BC, Sparta's fear of an enemy within was about to be overshadowed by a threat from outside. The Persian Empire, the largest the world had ever seen, was marching on Greece under King Xerxes. His army numbered in the hundreds of thousands. Greece, a patchwork of small, fighting city-states, had no real chance against him. Unless someone could buy time. That someone was King Leonidas. He led roughly 300 Spartan soldiers, along with a few thousand allied Greeks, to a narrow mountain pass called Thermopylae. The pass was so tight that only a small number of men could fight at once, which meant the huge Persian army could not use its size to win quickly. For 3 days, the Spartans held the line. On the final day, a local farmer betrayed the Greeks, showing the Persians a hidden path around the pass. Surrounded and outnumbered, Leonidas sent most of his allies away. He and his Spartans stayed behind. Every single one of them died, fighting to the last man. It is one of the most famous last stands in human history, but the truth is more complicated than the legend. Thermopylae was not a victory. It was a defeat that bought Greece a few extra days. The real battles that saved Greece, Salamis and Plataea, came later and involved many other city-states, not just Sparta. Still, the story of the 300 spread fast, and it made Sparta a legend across the ancient world. But legends come with a price. Sparta's reputation was about to grow so large that it would put a target on its own back, and the very Greeks it had helped save would soon turn against it. After the Persians were finally pushed back, Greece split into 2 camps. Athens built a powerful navy and an empire of allied cities, growing rich and proud. Sparta led its own alliance, the Peloponnesian League, made up of cities on land. 2 very different powers, one ruling the sea, one ruling the battlefield, and both too proud to share Greece peacefully. In 431 BC, that tension exploded into war. The Peloponnesian War would drag on for 27 brutal years. Athens hid behind its famous long walls, supplied by sea, while Sparta's army burned the farmland outside the city year after year. Then plague tore through crowded Athens, killing thousands, including its great leader, Pericles. Sparta, meanwhile, made a move that shocked many Greeks. It allied with Persia, its old enemy, trading gold for ships, just to finally beat Athens at its own game, the sea. The final blow came in 405 BC, when the Spartan general Lysander destroyed the Athenian fleet at Agoge. With no navy and no food coming in, Athens starved. In 404 BC, the city surrendered. Sparta's soldiers tore down the long walls of Athens to the sound of flute music, celebrating as the symbol of Athenian power fell to the ground stone by stone. Sparta now stood alone at the top of Greece. No city could challenge it. For the first time in its history, Sparta was not just feared. It ruled. But total power came with a problem Sparta had never faced before. It now had to govern the very cities it had spent decades fighting, and the cracks in its rigid system were already beginning to show. Sparta ruled Greece, but underneath that power, something was quietly breaking. Spartan citizens, the full warriors known as Spartiates, were supposed to be equals. In truth, only a small number of families controlled most of the land and wealth. Poorer Spartiates could not afford their share of the communal meals required to remain a citizen. If they fell behind, they lost their status completely. Over time, the number of true Spartan warriors shrank year after year, even as the Helot population kept growing around them. That imbalance fed Sparta's oldest fear. To keep the Helots terrified and obedient, Sparta relied on something called the Krypteia, a secret unit of young Spartan men sent out into the countryside at night. Their job was simple and chilling. Kill any Helot who seemed too strong, too clever, or too dangerous, with no trial and no warning. The ancient historian Thucydides describes one horrifying episode where Sparta promised freedom to 2,000 of its bravest Helots, as a reward for their loyal service. The Helots came forward proudly. They were never seen again. Sparta had quietly murdered every single one of them. This was a society claiming to stand for discipline and honor, built on a foundation of fear and secret killing. The myth of Spartan equality was fading fast, and so was its supply of real soldiers. Sparta could win battles, could humiliate Athens, but it could not keep producing the warriors that had made it great in the first place. Soon, on an open battlefield far from home, an enemy commander was about to expose exactly how hollow Sparta's power had become. Today, the modern town of Sparta sits near the same valley where it all began, home to around 35,000 people. Walk through it, and you will find very little left of the city that once ruled Greece. A few scattered stones, the outline of a theater, the base of a temple. That is mostly it. Archaeologists have spent decades digging here, and they keep finding small pieces, but nothing close to what survives in Athens or Rome. That is not bad luck. It is exactly what you would expect from a city that never built grand temples or palaces in the first place. Sparta poured everything into its soldiers, not its stonework. Today's Sparta relies heavily on tourism, drawing visitors who come expecting epic ruins, and instead find a quiet town with a famous name and a mostly empty ancient site. And that gap between the legend and what is actually left in the ground is the whole story. Sparta conquered an empire without walls. It built one of the most feared militaries in human history, and it vanished, leaving behind almost no monuments, because the discipline that built it was never meant to be carved in stone. It was meant to be lived, soldier by soldier, generation by generation, and when those soldiers were gone, so was Sparta. In the end, the most feared city in the ancient world left behind something rarer than ruins. It left behind a legend. If this journey through Sparta's rise and fall kept you hooked, give it a like. It genuinely helps us keep making these. And there are more forgotten cities and lost civilizations still waiting to be uncovered. Subscribe so you don't miss them. And as always, we'll see you in the next video.